I've mentioned my son. I also have a teenage daughter. So how can I talk about healthy eating with her while avoiding eye rolls or even giving her anxiety or making her feel bad about eating unhealthy?
I think one really important thing to remember is that they are always listening.
You're listening to Rise Above, a Rogers Behavioral Health podcast, where we sit down with Rogers experts who are changing the way the world views mental health and addiction. Well, listener, as summer winds down and the first day of school gets closer, many parents are getting ready for what I think is one of the most persistent challenges of the school year, packing your kids' lunch. Should you worry about protein and fiber and sugars? And what if your child is a picky eater and doesn't eat what you pack? And is it really possible to put together a healthy lunch without spending a fortune or, hours in the kitchen? So on this episode of Rise Above, I'm joined by Melissa Moody, a registered dietitian with Rogers Behavioral Health. We talk about how nutrition affects children's mood, focus, and emotional regulation, simple strategies for building balanced lunches, ways to handle picky eating, and how parents can encourage healthy eating habits without creating stress or anxiety around food, or in my case, eye rolls from a teenager. So if you're getting ready for another school year and looking for realistic advice that works for busy families, this conversation is for you. And as I said earlier, joining me is Melissa Moody. Melissa, thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So I know it probably doesn't need to be said that nutrition benefits children's health and well-being, but how does it impact a child's mood or focus or emotions?
Yeah, there's two main things I like to remember with that. So one is the amount of food that our children are getting. We want to make sure that they're eating frequently enough. So there is a pretty easy rule of thumb that we like to remind our patients and our residents and clients about, and that's the rule of threes. So it's having 3 meals around 3 snacks every day and eating approximately every 3 hours based on that.
So wait, you say 3 meals around 3 snacks. So you're saying breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, snack?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The dinner snack or the post-dinner snack can kind of be based around the kids' activities and sports and things like that and hunger levels. But usually there's a snack time at school, and then after school, which we'll get to at some point, but they're usually come home ravenous. So that's the afternoon snack that fits in before dinner. Yep. And then the every 3 hours I think that's a really just helpful tool to think of, because otherwise we might, especially in the summer, right? We're coming off of summer right now, but thinking of, okay, we're just going to wait for our kids to tell us they're hungry. Sometimes that ends up with our kids getting hangry, or the angry with hunger. So overall intake, amount of food is really important. And then the other thing that's important and how it relates with our, our children's ability to regulate, that would be more related to the balance of the macronutrients. So we have 3 main macronutrients, and those are carbohydrates, protein, and added fat. So we do want to make sure we're getting all 3 of those nutrients in at every meal, and then a combination of the 2 at snacks. We can definitely dive into that more. But overall, if our intake is too low or if it's unbalanced, then that can lead to our kids feeling irritable, having less ability to focus, maybe less ability to regulate their emotions throughout the day. So it's pretty important to make sure we're doing both those things.
So I guess as a parent, it's important to use lunch as a tool to support a kid's mental wellness, yes?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So what does that look like? I'm packing lunches, and I want to make sure that I get everything that a healthy child needs in their lunch, but also I don't want it to take a lot of time. But what does it look like, a balanced lunch for a kid?
Yeah, I think a really simple formula. Sometimes we tend to overcomplicate things. If you ever go on social media, I feel like there's so many influencers out there that are well-meaning, but sometimes too much information can just lead us into analysis paralysis, where we're we don't know what to do. So my easy formula, one that we use here at Rogers, would be an entree plus a fruit plus a vegetable, and then usually plus a dairy. So that's 4 things. Now, a lot of times at school, the kids are getting the milk or chocolate milk alongside it. So that would count as their dairy. If kids are lactose free, there's non-dairy alternatives that the parents are already probably very aware of. So your entree would be the thing that the stereotypical lunch would be a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Yeah.
Now, that is a great fallback standard. I love a PB&J for my kids too. However, the protein in peanut butter is actually not very high. So we would definitely want to make sure that they're getting the protein through a different source as well. The dairy, if they're having milk, that's going to have protein in it. You could also feel free to throw in like a cheese stick, a yogurt. My kids like hard-boiled eggs. So things like that can also be a good standby in there. And then a fruit and a vegetable. So you can think of making their lunchbox look like half fruits and vegetables, and then the other half having the entree, and then the dairy on the side.
Okay. You mentioned eggs for your kids. I don't know if I could send a hard-boiled egg with my child. I don't
I
know if
know, it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird.
But so what are some easy, nutritious lunch ideas?
Yeah, yep. So one thing, and my kids actually won't eat sandwiches. My two at home, they don't like bread.
Send them an egg. Send them with an egg.
Right. So that's where we have gotten where I'm like, we got to eat something. We got to have some options. But they often request a snack lunch. And that doesn't mean like baked snacks I'm just throwing in their lunchbox, but it's more like creating usually crackers, some cheese things, some salami or deli meat, something like that to kind of create like a charcuterie board for lunch. I'm also throwing the fruits and vegetables in. One of my kids likes hummus, the other one doesn't, right? All kids don't like the same thing. So it's really just trying to figure out what accommodates them and their preferences that they're going to eat, but still making it nutritious and balanced.
Mm-hmm. I guess another question that I always come back to is, as you said, kids come home from school hungry. Is it possible to build a lunch that'll actually keep them full? I mean, are there ways to do this?
Yeah, so let's talk about what might lead a kid to being hungry when they come home. So first of all, it might be their lunch is not enough food for them. We have growing kids. I think sometimes, at least for myself, I get stuck at like, oh yeah, my kid ate this and this and this last year. Well, now they're growing or they're back in soccer. So they actually have increased needs. So if they are eating their full lunch, then maybe we need to increase what we're giving them. The other thing, if they're coming home and they're not eating their food, then we kind of have to dive into that. Like, hey, are you getting hot lunch on the side? That happens to my kids sometimes, right?
Mine too, yeah.
Are we just not liking the food we're packing? How can we get a little bit more of their involvement to selecting some of the food within the options that we want them to have, right? So within these balanced entree options, fruits and vegetables, some dairy sides, things like that. The two macronutrients that are going to help keep our kids full would be added fats and protein. So if we are giving them mostly carbohydrates, so if we're giving them, crackers and bread or, like a jam sandwich, something like that, if we're giving them fruit even on the side. So fruit is going to be mostly carbohydrates with some fiber. Then they might be hungry within a couple hours, come home, come off the bus, like, where's my snack, right? We gotta make sure we're setting them up with a different balance of foods then.
So you said fats and protein?
Yeah. So protein we've kind of touched on. So that could be, the easy go-tos of a deli meat, beef or turkey jerky, cheese of any form. Greek yogurt is going to be a good source of protein. We also have like vegetarian sources, right? Beans, legumes, edamame. And then healthy fats. Yep. So that doesn't just mean butter and olive oil, things like that. Some Greek yogurt is going to be non-fat or fat-free. But then we can also choose the 2% or the 4%, knowing that is going to help keep our child full for a little bit longer. Same with our mozzarella sticks. There's fat-free cheese, and then there's cheese that has the normal amount of fat. I usually tend to encourage parents to choose more of like the moderate fat amounts for our dairy products instead of the fat-free for their kids. There's also avocado. So maybe that's similar to the hard-boiled egg and that like what kid really wants to eat an avocado at school. Some might want guacamole with a whole grain chip or something like that. And then there's also nuts and seeds that would be a good source of added fat and a little bit of protein. So like think a trail mix type thing for a snack.
So you've mentioned a lot of things that my kids won't eat.
Okay.
So what's your advice for parents that are dealing with picky eaters?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to get a little nutrition counseling here, but I
Let's
think that
go.
matters when we're doing this. I think we as parents, or any parents out there, they do have to give themselves some grace and know that their kid is, for the most part, most kids do grow out of picky eating. And we can talk about ARFID, which is avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. That's separate. But most kids don't go off to high school or college only eating like the two foods on their plate kind of a thing. So we do have to take a step back and check our own anxiety in that too, because our kids pick up what we put down. So if we're serving them a new food or we're serving them a food we know they hate, and we're super anxious, they're going to enter the meal thinking like, well, I can't, a lot of mixed emotions. There have been many studies done on introducing foods to kids from baby, when they're 6 to 9 months old, you first introduce it all the way to elementary and above. And it's somewhere between like 8 and 15 times. I think most of us have heard that by now, that you do need to introduce food multiple times before someone can determine that they're used to the texture, used to the taste, and they kind of accept it as a food that they can eat. Then from there, they might still decide, I don't like the way that tastes, right? They still can have preferences. We just need to make sure that they are being introduced to the foods often enough. So 2 things to help with that, besides checking your own anxiety gently, would be to include a safe food with the food we're trying. So if my kid likes mac and cheese and he doesn't like asparagus, I'm not just going to give him a plate of asparagus with, chicken that he kind of is okay about and rice or quinoa that he's whatever. I'm going to make sure I put a food on there that's also going to fill his belly up, and then encourage him to try the food. Sometimes it's as simple as like having the food on your plate with the other food. Sometimes it's going to be smelling it. We can really start with small baby steps. It takes patience. It's not super fun, especially if you have one kid who is more adventurous or eats more, and then you have another kid who's not as much. It can be a little bit like frustrating as a parent. So really just knowing like I'm putting the time in because I want to develop well-rounded, well-balanced eaters. That can be a goal for us.
So what if your child comes home day after day with an uneaten lunch? Is it as simple as just getting them foods that they want to eat for lunch? Is that how we should tackle that as a parent?
That's such a good question. I think we as parents, from a nutrition perspective, we are in charge of providing their structure around food. So that's when we can get back to the rule of 3s. We also are in charge of making sure they're eating from all the main food groups. So one thing we could do in that case would be kind of giving our kid choice, no choice. So we're going to give them a vegetable. Do you want carrots or snap peas? Instead of, hey, do you want carrots tonight? Or do you want carrots for your lunch? Or, hey, I put carrots in your lunch, right? So it gives them a little bit more of that empowerment. I think we've all used that in parenting strategies for other things, but
make them feel like they chose it.
Yeah. Yep. And most kids get to a point where they're like, I know what you're doing.
But I'll still take the carrots.
I'll still take the carrots. Sometimes, and this kind of sometimes we run up to like time or, budget issues and things like that. But I think it can be really great. It can be really helpful to empower our kids, take them to the grocery store if we're able to, let them see all the different colors of the fruits and vegetables, have them pick one out for their lunch that week. Knowing that, okay, yeah, I have the carrots that are the good standby that I know you're going to eat, but I want you to develop, or I want to encourage you to eat a different vegetable, maybe cauliflower or broccoli. Which one can we try? Having them pick it out themselves. From a budget standpoint too, I know that there's like cauliflower and broccoli and things like that are prepackaged. It's cheaper to just buy it off of the line where the fruits are, watered on instead of in the glass cabinets. And then your kid can pick out like their stock of broccoli that they want for that week. Then they can take it home. You can set them up with like a plastic kid-friendly knife and have them chop it up themselves. So like maybe they still won't like it, but all of those things are allowing them to take a little bit more ownership and empower them in some ways.
Sure. And we will be right back. We don't talk enough about mental health later in life. Big changes like retirement, health issues, grief, or caregiving can really take a toll. And a lot of people feel like they're supposed to just push through it. LifeWell at Rogers Behavioral Health is an inpatient mental health program created specifically for adults 55 and older. The care is age-specific, compassionate, and focused on helping people feel stable again, surrounded by peers who are in a similar stage of life. If you or someone you care about needs support right now, help is available. You can learn more or request a free screening at rogersbh.org/lifewell or call 833-308-5887. And now back to the interview. So you've mentioned budgets a few times there. How can a family create a healthy lunch on a tight budget?
Yeah, I think that's really important to consider all different socioeconomic levels that people might be on. So first of all, school provided lunches, if they are through the state funded program, then they are required to meet certain standards. So I do think that school lunches are a really great affordable option for people, especially if their school is partially subsidizing them. They do have to have certain amounts of fruits and vegetables. They have to limit the saturated fat. They have to limit, I think, sodium content. There are things that are going to be missing from a school lunch at some schools, depending on that school's budget. But I don't think that parents should shy away from relying on the school lunches, especially if that helps them financially or in other ways, so that they have maybe more time in the morning to hang out with their kids a little bit, or more money in their budget to make a healthy family meal. So that'd be one thing on the school provided lunches to kind of consider. In an overall grocery budget, the one thing that we would recommend would be shopping the perimeter of the store. So that would be, usually your fruits and vegetables, your protein section, your frozen section, and then the inside is going to be a little bit more of like the processed food, things like that. And that also happens to be a little bit less nutritious at times, but it's also more expensive.
I have never heard of that before, but you're absolutely right. Shopping what did you call it? The exterior,
the perimeter, yeah,
the perimeter of the store. No, it makes a lot of sense now that I'm thinking about, because inside you get the processed foods for sure.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with processed foods. I think they have a time and place, and they're helpful, and like when people are crunched for time, things like that, right? Like there's a ton of really necessary ingredients in the interior of the store too. Like there's breads and there's pasta and sauces and stuff like that. So it's not to avoid that, but it's also just like go shop the exterior first, the perimeter, and then go inside for the rest of the stuff that you need. One thing too would be to focus on the basics. And so we can get to that in a little bit, but that also can help to reduce food waste. Because if you think about it, if you are allowing food to expire, that's just money that you're throwing away that you already spent on food. Buying in bulk can be helpful if you have a grocery store that offers, grains or rice and things like that in larger quantities. Usually that's going to be cheaper the more that you're able to buy at once. Prepping things yourself. So instead of buying the pre-cut up vegetables and fruits, just buying the whole bag of apples and chopping it yourself. And then at home, if you're trying to save money for meals other than probably lunch, so if we're thinking about like dinner, things like that, fresh fruit and vegetables are very good, but they have very similar nutrient profiles to the fruits and vegetables that are frozen or canned. Especially if you're going to rinse the canned vegetables, which most people do, that rinses off the sodium that it was processed with. Frozen fruit is frozen usually at the peak of ripeness, so it's going to have the same antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals that the fresh stuff, and it's going to be a lot cheaper. For staples, I would recommend, having things that you could make an easy lunch on. So that might be some sort of whole grain bread. It could be a peanut butter. Bananas and apples are usually less expensive fruit. If your kids like carrots, I also like the other protein sources that can be used for pretty much every meal would be Greek yogurt. That can be used to like make a parfait. That can be put into a smoothie. It can be used in place of sour cream on your tacos. It's a pretty versatile ingredient.
Which I will say I did not believe until I tried it. And you know what? It's basically sour cream.
It's the same exact thing. And it's actually cheaper to buy Greek yogurt because you can use most of it instead of sour cream. You're really only going to use like one time.
Yes, always. Like maybe I'll turn it into a dip, and then I never do.
No, yeah.
All right, so we are talking. It is the end of summer. We are coming back up to the school year. It's very sad for my children. It's a little bit of relief for me, but this is why we're talking about the school lunches. But is there a way that I can like reset their routines when it comes to meals? Because, pretty soon we're going to be in a routine heavy situation. And right now things are still pretty lax.
Yeah. So I have to do this too with my kids. I'm thinking, I think probably a week before school starts, if you're around, if you're in town, that would be a great time to start kind of like slowly modifying sleep schedules to align better with the school start time. And then with that, I think would come more of like the breakfast that's being timed appropriately too. Um, and that might be a practice run a few days beforehand too, to be like, okay, can we get this timing all set? Because sometimes the last thing, at least my kids do, is eat breakfast before they run out the door to catch the bus. And I would want to make sure they have enough time to eat it, not feel anxious, not feel rushed, maybe digest it a bit, and then get out the door. Going to bed earlier and eating healthier snacks maybe throughout the day. So summer comes with a lot of treats, a lot of fun times, right? And we don't want to end that too soon. And at the same time, school does bring a little bit more structure. So getting our kids used to that routine again is going to be really helpful.
Okay, so we've somehow managed to kind of avoid a question that, I think about often. I'm sure a lot of parents do, and that comes to like junk food, sugar, cookies. I know I always like to throw a little chocolate or something in my kids' lunch, but how concerned should a parent be about sugar when it comes to their lunches?
Yeah, I love making it a normalized part of their meal. I think throwing a small sweet treat in every now and then. I mean, if you do it every day or every other day, I think, or a nice little note in for them, I think can be a good way to, I guess, model that like treats are okay to have in moderation. Like we don't want our kids to be scared of any food. We don't want them to be, thinking sugar is the worst thing to be eating. And we also want them to know that there's a lot of other foods that they need to eat and to fill their bellies. Um, so I wouldn't want anyone really to be concerned about sugar. I think if we are making our own lunches, I think that is within our control, right? So if we are making our own sandwiches, choosing spreads like jam or jelly that don't have a ton of added sugar. Some foods have, I guess, more like hidden added sugars. That might be peanut butter is a pretty
I was
big
going
one.
to ask, are there foods that aren't as nutritious as we might think?
So peanut butter is something that we consider a protein source a lot for vegetarians and for kids who are maybe more picky. However, I just, as a dietitian with my own kids, I don't view it as a protein source. It's kind of just like a way for them to get their bread, their carb, and it has some good source of added fat in it. Um, I do look for peanut butter that is just peanuts,
Mm-hmm.
and peanuts do have their own natural oil, so the consistency of that maybe isn't super appealing to some kids. So there are some that have like some sort of oil and salt in them too. We would just maybe want to stay away from the peanut butters that have cane sugar added to them, because that's not truly necessary in that spread.
Besides peanut butter, is there any other secret
Oh,
junk food? Secret junk food.
secret junk food. One thing that can be a little tricky would be juice.
Okay.
So, and I think a lot of pediatricians tend to talk about that one and kind of harp on it. I think there's a time and place for it. I think if it's 100% juice, you can get away with it sometimes. However, you're drinking it, so it goes down quicker. Sometimes that can be helpful for kids that struggle to eat in the morning. Sometimes we want to give them a glass of juice or a glass of milk or something to drink. But oftentimes, if juice is just kind of extra on top of something, it's usually not going to be needed. And I would prefer that a kid would have an apple or an orange. Those also have the fiber in them. So when you eat the whole fruit, not the orange peel, but the whole apple or the whole orange outside of the peel, um, then you're going to get more fiber. And actually, fiber is something we haven't touched on too much, but that is going to help with keeping digestive system regular. So especially going back to school, kids can become more constipated. They might not feel comfortable going to the bathroom at school. So just keeping things regular is one of the things that fiber helps with. And that's going to be found in fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grain products. So if you have whole grain bread or crackers or pasta, and then things like beans and legumes.
So okay, we haven't talked about protein bars. That's a thing I keep in the pantry, but what are your thoughts on protein bars?
Yeah, I think, and this is kind of my answer for a lot of things, there's a time and place for them. So I think they can be really helpful tools for active children who are running out the door, coming home from school. You need something really quick, and you throw a protein bar at them, pack it in their backpack for after school, kind of a thing. I like to pair those sorts of things though with some sort of fruit, just to make sure they are getting more fiber in them. Most protein bars are not going to be super high in fiber. And so it's mostly carbs, which are helpful. We need carbohydrates. That's our energy source. And then there's going to be protein in them. I do tend to look at the labels of them and try to find ones that have more than 5 grams of protein. So some protein bars call themselves protein bars and they have very little protein. So I guess that could be another sneaky food because that type of label isn't regulated. And then I would want to see less than 10 grams of added sugar in a protein bar. Otherwise, it could just kind of be a sugar bomb, which if a kid is going out to soccer practice, honestly, not the worst thing in the world to have quick acting sugar. And it's good to be aware of what we're putting in our kids' bodies.
And we will be right back. Real quick, I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about WISE, the Initiative for Stigma Elimination. It unites people across the nation to support those touched by mental illness and addiction. The compassionate approach champions personal stories and powerful connections, fostering healing by reducing stigma through evidence-based practices. Rogers Behavioral Health supports the work of WISE through their Community Learning and Engagement Department. WISE collaborates with a diverse network of organizations and individuals united in the fight against stigma. You can learn more about WISE, explore their 4 key programs, and connect with them by visiting the website www.eliminatestigma.org. And now back to the interview. I've mentioned my son. I also have a teenage daughter. So how can I talk about healthy eating with her while avoiding eye rolls or even giving her anxiety or making her feel bad about eating unhealthy?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I'm really glad that you're asking that, actually. I think, and I work with, my unit is a unit of teenage girls that I work on here. And I think one really important thing to remember is that they are always listening. So even if we're not talking about their body, if we're talking about our own body, or we're talking about certain foods that we ate, they're hearing that and then they're applying that judgment to themselves. So if we're calling food good or bad, even if it's not food they're eating, if we're like, oh, I was so bad earlier, I had XYZ at lunch, I have to have a salad now, or I have to go for a run. Our kids are going to learn that pattern and then apply it to themselves. So really being careful about what you say, but also the first step of that might be applying that to yourself, because having those thoughts yourselves, isn't super healthy either. I really try to encourage parents to not label foods as good versus bad. So I know sometimes people do red light, yellow light, green light foods. That can be helpful. I think my son actually learned that at school. That even is a little bit like too much of a label for me, though. I think I like talking to my kids about what they're putting in their bodies, how it makes them feel. If someone overindulges on candy or they're, a holiday meal or a birthday meal or something like that, and they don't feel super good after, we don't want to rush to judgment or like shame or blame them, but instead being like, oh man, yeah, I wonder if it could have been that, it could have been something else. Like, we could think about that more next time. Do you want me to remind you of that? Like the next time we're eating our trick or treat candy, something like that. I think talking neutrally, right, about our own body, and overall just like modeling that healthy relationship. So like what you want to see in your daughter or your younger children, like making sure we're starting to embody that ourselves. It doesn't have to be waking up at 5 and going for a run and eating super healthy. It can just be moving, walking the dog after dinner, showing them that like movement is important too.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned a little bit earlier, but I'm going to assume you are for having kids help pack their own lunches.
Yes. Yeah.
You want to talk about the benefits of that?
Yeah, I think, so it's also kid dependent. Some kid may be completely uninterested. If you're pulling teeth to get your kid to pack their lunch, like back away, right? But if your kid feels cool or feels empowered to be able to choose what they get, where to put it, I'm sure you've seen those bento boxes. There's a brand of Bento. So those have like the pre-portioned things that kind of can remind you, oh yeah, the big slot is for your entree, your sandwich, your crackers and cheese and meat, whatever you're doing. And then there's a couple other components that you can kind of, I think that's helpful for kids to kind of visualize, oh yeah, I do need like 4 things or 5 things in my lunch. You can start small, like we mentioned, going to the grocery store, picking out a couple things. You can give them choice, no choice. You can have them help you with other meals too, just to get comfortable in the kitchen when you maybe have more time. I think if I ask my kids to make their lunches in the morning when we're trying to get out the door, it's not going to work, right?
Oh yeah, no.
So maybe not even during the week. Maybe it's a Sunday night thing. We pack a couple, pre-pack a couple things, or they pack their snack for the next day, kind of just to gauge their interest and get them involved.
All right, so we've talked a lot about this topic. What are your top 3 back to school lunch tips for a busy family? That's right. You have to come up with 3.
I know, and go, right? Honestly, speaking from personal experience about what I'm going to be doing is the prepping them probably a week or 2 in advance before school starts, kind of getting the routine a little bit more scheduled, so that I'm used to it too, because I'm the one leading the show every morning. Allowing them some choices still. I really want to make sure that is something that I stress here, that like if kids feel empowered with their food choices, they're more likely to try the foods. And then the last one would be making it work for your family. And we talked a little bit about budget. It also depends on time. If we have 2 working parents and school lunches need to all be made on Sunday night, then you have to figure out what food can last for the week. So really making it work for your family, that's the most sustainable habit to form. If you try to do some elaborate system, or you're worried about your kid getting all the colors of the rainbow every single day, that isn't usually attainable for most parents, especially if you're working, or especially if you have multiple kids. So really trying to do something that works for you from the get-go, so that you're more likely to stick with it.
So I feel like you've already probably said it, but parent to parent, one thing that a parent should take away from this conversation, what would it be?
It could go back to the picky eating thing. It is really just like, give yourself some grace. We're all doing the best we can. And I know that comes from my counseling background, but I do really think our kids pick up what we're saying. So from a body image standpoint too, developing eating disorders, but also just overall, we have so many things to worry about as parents these days. If anyone's on social media, they are being inundated with information, and there's almost always conflicting information. So sometimes we just have to shut it all off and just figure out what do I need to do to support my kids right now? The rule of 3s is an easy thing to follow. So taking that into note, being okay, if I do nothing else but feed my kids the rule of 3s, I'm doing okay.
You said conflicting information. Do you have advice for where to find non-conflicting information?
I do really like Harvard's website. They have something called the Harvard plate. It was based on the My Plate, but there's a couple other components to it. So I think their website is called Nutrition Source, but if you just search Harvard Nutrition, that's pretty good. I also do want to stress, so I'm a registered dietitian. There's, like I said, a lot of people out there giving a lot of information. Some of them are registered dietitians too. However, a lot of people are just kind of oh, I picked this up from here, or, the word nutritionist is not regulated in any shape or form. So if you're getting information that you feel a little iffy about it, kind of check the source on it for sure. And not saying that all nutritionists don't know what they're talking about, but we really want to make sure that we're not following ill-given advice.
Well, that's good advice. Melissa, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate your time, and hopefully we do this again sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, listener, a few takeaways stood out from this conversation for me. Keep meals simple, focus on balance over perfection, involve your kids when possible, and remember the rule of 3s. 3 meals, 3 snacks, and eating about every 3 hours. Perhaps most importantly, Melissa reminded parents to give themselves a little grace. Building healthy habits is a process, and perfection isn't the goal. So thanks for listening to this conversation, and best of luck to all the students, parents, caregivers, and teachers heading into a new school year. And thanks for listening to another episode of Rise Above, a podcast from Rogers Behavioral Health. Be sure to like and subscribe to be notified of new episodes. And as always, if you or someone you care about is struggling with a mental health or substance use disorder, visit rogersbh.org for a free mental health screening. Until next time, thank you so much for listening.